I first became aware of Casey's existence about 10 days ago. That's not a joke. I was looking through Loudwire's 2024 release calendar and found them tucked away squarely at the beginning of January. Now, over a week and a half later, I would like to say, I'm sorry. I was unfamiliar with your game. Welsh melodic hardcore quintet Casey released their third full-length album, How to Disappear, on January 12th, and when they did, I had no idea who they were. I maybe saw a song of theirs get recommended on Dreambound every once in a while, but never took the plunge to see what they were about. Now I have, and wow. I pulled up Puncture Wounds to Heaven on a whim last week, and a pretty normal habit for me is whenever I'm listening to a new band for the first time, if I like it, I'll pull up their Instagram while doing so and get a picture of who I'm listening to. The first thing I notice while perusing their page is not their sound or their aesthetic or what tour they're on, it's how many people have left comments saying things like, "Yet another masterpiece, you always release music at a pivotal time in my life, I love you so much." That sort of thing. But just the sheer amount of appreciation and outpouring of heartfelt stories really struck me. Most people would kill to have an audience that devoted. So as I keep scrolling, I start understanding why. The topics they've tackled, the poetry of their lyrics, and the beauty of their music were all things fans were attached to on a really deep level. I saw the celebration of new tracks as they were released, the heartbreak as the band decided to call it quits in 2019, and the relief and pure joy of the band getting back together in 2022. All of those things were things I learned just through comments on their Instagram. So before I'd even heard as much as one song from Casey, I was knee-deep in their lore, with this picture of such importance and trust from their fan base that I was inspired to check out what they had to offer. And I'm very happy to say that faithfulness is very well earned. How to Disappear is ambient, post-hardcore, atmospheric, melodic, sad boy, modern space rock. It's 45 minutes of gut-wrench, gorgeous guitars and beautiful instrumentation layering under a monumental lyrical journey of grief and existentialism. It's good. In a, I feel bad but can't bring myself to cry, so I'll listen to this album to send me fully over the edge type of good. Coming into this album having heard none of the band's previous offerings, I was pretty blown away by how all this comes together. It's the sort of record that puts most of its formula on full display within the first 2 songs, so within the first 7-8-ish minutes, you've got a pretty clear picture of what it is and whether it's something you're into or not. I'm a sucker for big, spacey, full-sounding reverb, and to get that for 45 minutes was honestly pretty awesome. It sets the tone for this ethereal, introspective journey that tugs at your heartstrings and sounds really pretty in conjunction with the rest of the guitar work. It has overdriven passages, but it never gets visceral. This isn't a record built on riffage or high-energy stuff. It's more focused on soft cleans, really expressive leads, and these immense chord progressions that get really big, especially around the choruses. I liken it to a Pliny or a David Maxim Mikic level of atmospheric development without those guys' level of technical complexity on guitar. It's a really good stage for these guys to just play their hearts out on. It's not an album driven by heavy guitar or faster paces, so genres like hardcore punk or screamo don't seem like good qualifiers here, and I can see why some people would get confused. I found them on a heavy metal release timeline for 2024, so not getting a heavy metal record could be a disappointment for some, especially if that's more of what the band's built their sound on in the first place. But I don't need every record I ever listen to scratch an itch like that, and I think there's tons that one could take away from an experience as ethereal as this one if you just sit back and take it all in. What really ties all of this together is that lyricism. It's pushing the boundaries on how verbose and expressive one can be in tune with the instrumental without just ditching it all together and going full spoken word slam poetry. His melodies are pretty. They're a great compliment to the instrumentation, and the topics he dives into are pretty layered ones. Questing through the journey of processing grief, no longer being with loved ones, asking a higher power for assistance with his struggles, it can be a lot to take in, especially when Tom goes full poet mode and just lets everything pour out. Thing is, How to Disappear feels like an album built around vocals first, then seeing where the music can fit around it. There's this dreamy aura that permeates almost every song here, to a point where it sounds like all of the instruments are a bed upon which the lyrics can then become the centerpiece. The soundscapes are beautiful, don't get me wrong, but sonically, sometimes it doesn't feel like there's very much to separate one song from the next. That vibe you get from the first 8 minutes, you get it for the entire 45. And even things like some songs being of a slightly faster tempo, or the drums maybe pick up a little bit more, doesn't really do very much to help separate where you are at in the middle of this big therapy session. That might not sound like it's really a problem for some, but the guitars, drums, bass, pianos, synths, none of that are really ever the driving force of any of these songs. Tom's vocals are, and the instruments are just enhancing the moody devastation that he's already conveying. Now, I'm not saying this because I'm a metalhead and happen to like screaming, but man, I wish Tom tapped more into that on this record. The tracks with harsher vocals, few and far between as they are some of the ones that stand out as the most memorable to my ears in this whole experience, especially considering you're already dealing with a lot of raw subject matter anyway, and sometimes screaming is just the best vehicle of conveying that. His screams are also genuinely great, so I was kind of saddened they didn't get used more on this album. But all of that to say, I can still really appreciate How to Disappear for what it is. I can see a lot of people maybe making Holding Absence comparisons to it, and I don't think that's entirely fair. This is allowed to be a similar experience while still being its own thing. It's not hardcore punk, but it's also not shoegaze. It's somewhere in the middle. It's designed to get you entranced in the drama of it all, and if you're willing to fully go down its melancholic path, it will reward you with a really great sense of fulfillment at the end. Perhaps this album would have hit a little harder with me if I had personally gone through some of the types of grief or existential questions that Tom is wandering through, but for what it is, it's a phenomenal listen front to back. And now I can very clearly see, as somebody jumping into Casey for the very first time, why so many fans trust them to convey messages like this. I highly recommend How to Disappear. You might laugh at this, but this record almost gives me like late 2000s Reliant K vibes if they embraced a soft glow 80s film camera type of aesthetic. I don't know, but I can't explain it better than that. You're just going to have to live with it.